Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we'll start off with our major top stories and reports. In a recent interview, the head of the Egyptian Commercial Services explained that Egypt seeks to increase trading with African nations, revealing a targeted 20% growth in intra-continent trading of 20% of the coming 5 years. More details in the following report.
According to Yahya Al-Wathiq Billah, head of the Egyptian Commercial Service, Egypt aims to strengthen its trade relationship with Africa, looking to boost intra-continent trade by 20% in the coming 5 years to reach $7.4 billion. The ECS had noted that this increase will be driven by the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, a pact between the 49 member states of the African Union to enable the free flow of goods and services across the continent. Egypt, along with 47 countries, has ratified the agreement. Yahya Al-Wathiq explained the rest of the countries to ratify the trade agreement by the second half of 2024. During the summer of 2023, the Cabinet's Media Center stated that Africa intra-trading was recorded at less than 18%, compared to around 50% in the trade between Asian countries and 70% between European countries. Egyptian exports to Africa rose by 13% year-on-year during the first 10 months of 2023 to hit $6 billion, driven by exports of marble, cement, and phosphate. The North African country aims to improve access to Egyptian exports in the next 6 years, revealing a targeted increase of no less than 20% to reach $145 billion by 2030, according to a new IDSC release on the government's goals for the president's new term.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and we're delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Said Kholy, economic expert. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, sir, Egypt seeks to increase trading with African nations, targeting 20% growth in intra-African trade. Would you please tell us more about the possibility of increasing trade with African nations during this year?
We already have increased our export to African nation or African continent. For example, from January to October 2023, we increased our export to Africa by 13%. And this, we reach about $6 billion American dollar to export in Africa. I believe within the next year, 2024, this year and next year, would be able to reach the target of 20% because we have a very strong tie with several African nations. And let me shed the light for one very important issue in regarding export in Africa, which is African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which it could be Egypt next game change in exporting not only for the European or Arab country, but for African nation, where the African Continental Free Trade Agreement promote the exchange between the member of this treaty, of this agreement, to be able to open the channel for all our export in terms of materials, in terms of finished goods, in terms of service at the same time. And I believe the government of Egypt and the leadership of Egypt is really working very hard in order to reach African in terms of export. And also we need the materials from African nation, because African nation, I believe, it's still a virgin continental, which is have a lot of mineral, a lot of agricultural resources, a lot of food supply. I believe Africa, it will be in the near future, it will be the hub for food supplier for the rest of the world.
Sir, what specific measures is Egypt planning to implement to achieve the 20% growth in intra-continent trade?
Let me shed the light for the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. They have several protocols. The first protocol is in trade of goods, finished goods, where the purpose of that is to elimination of duty and quantitative restriction on import. There is no restriction in import from one country to another country according to this agreement. And at the same time, equal treatment for import and domestic products between the member country, elimination of non-tariff barriers. We really reduce the trade barriers or eliminate it between the member of this country. The rule of origin is a very important issue, which is the first protocol, and cooperation of customer authorities between this between member nation in this agreement, and trade facilitation and transit, which we simplify the process of exchange between the neighbor country, and also trade remedies protection for infant industry and general expectation, and that encourage the small business and the intermediate business to be part of this agreement, and also cooperation on product standard and regulation. We should really issue African standard, quality standard for whatever agriculture product or industrial product, and technical assessment from the major trader or investor in Africa, and where China play a very important role in that issue, capacity building and cooperation, which Egypt should play a very important role in terms of capacity building by building, and through your program, I really we can make a recommendation for President Sisi to open an African university for graduate and undergraduate students from the 45 countries signed this agreement, and these people will be our ambassador in Africa. The second protocol of trade in service, not only in goods but also in service, transparency of service regulation. We should ease up the regulation in order to enhance and increase the level of service between African nations. And I believe Egypt has the experience of communication and information technology to be able to play a very important role in that area. Mutual recognition of standard licensing and certification of service supplier, and this it has to be between all different governments and people responsible for issuing license, and we can have African license in the future. Also, progressive liberation of service sector. We have to integrate the private business and small business and intermediate business and local investor in order to share part in this kind of agreement. That is very important area. Service suppliers shall be treated no less favorably than a domestic supplier in liberalized sector, and that is very important. We should give the advantage for our local suppliers from all different countries to be a part of this agreement, not only a governmental supplier. Provision of general and security expectation. Security is very important, and as you recall, China with the Silk Road, which goes from China to South Africa and goes through Egypt and through many countries in Africa, this will play a very important. In order to this to be effective, we need security. And Egypt, it can play a very important role in providing security for our neighbor country. That is very important. The third protocol is dispute settlement, which is we have to really obey the law and order between the people of the country signing this agreement, rules and the procedure for settlement or dispute within the African country, African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That is the three major steps or these three major proposals which is signed by all countries, and I believe Egypt it can play a very important role in the future regarding this proposal.
Right, great. Dr. Kholy, as you mentioned, the Africa Free Trade Agreement is very essential for the flow of trade between African nations. But what are the main challenges in priority to be dealt with regarding the implementation of this agreement on the ground? And do you expect more countries to be ratifying this agreement during the second half of 2024?
I believe several countries would like to join the 45 people signed in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and I believe 2024 and 25 it will be able to include all different countries in the continent, and that is in order to, it's already implemented, this kind of agreement. It's signed and it's in action right now, and that's why I always say Egypt next game change for this agreement to be very effective in the future. And it's already done, and it's already, we have a free trade agreement between all these nations, African nations. And remember the role of leadership of Egypt for the last 8 years played a very important role in inclusion of Egypt with African nations. With Egypt a few years ago, 3 years ago, President Sisi was the leader of African Union, and all of that is really it's action on the ground taken already, and we'll be able to expand our export and exchange idea and exchange idea and technology and resources. Remember, Africa or African countries, they have a lot of natural resources, and we used to export, most of our export from our African nation to the rest of the world is raw material. We should add value to our raw material in order to increase the value of the free trade agreement.
Right. Dr. Kholy, how do you see the significance of infrastructure development in order to increase intra-African trade? And are there any initiatives or projects in place to be implemented during the year 2024?
Remember, in the last 8 years, Egypt was working very hard in order to, in terms of economy, we have reducing goods and services, industry and agriculture, but distribution is very important. So in the last 8 years, Egypt invested very, very heavily in infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about roads, tunnels, railways, and all of this is really is the logistic of transporting goods and services from Egypt to the rest of the world, and especially to Africa. I believe next we should really use our natural resources like the Nile River in order to ship our products through the Nile, and we should really work hard with African nations, with African banks, is to provide a real road. It goes from Egypt, it goes all the way to South Africa. And that is my dream. If we do that, we'll be able to expand and increase the volume of export between the 45 members of Africa.
Great. Well, I would like to thank you so much, Dr. El Sayed Al Kholy, Professor of Economics. Many thanks for your insight. And dear viewers, now we move back to our special reports. The Sudanese government has withdrawn from the upcoming GAD Extraordinary Summit scheduled for January 18, citing the need for a crucial face-to-face meeting between Sudan's military leaders. More details in the following report.
Minister of Labor has launched the Mehani 2030 project to equip youth with the skills required for the job market, both domestically and internationally. The project was launched during the first edition of the Vocational Training Conference with the presence of Minister of Labor Hassan Shaheta, Minister of Planning and Economic Development Hail Al-Said, Minister of Finance Muhammad Mai.
Sudan entered Monday in the 9th month of the war with no politically negotiated solution at hand. The nation's government said it won't attend the January 18th IGAD Extraordinary Summit According to local media Sudan Tribune, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs cited the need for a face-to-face meeting between the warring generals prior to broader discussions with the regional bloc. The conflict has killed over 12,000 people and displaced millions, leaving them with no prospects. The UN humanitarian chief said on January 4th that nearly 25 million people across Sudan will need humanitarian assistance in 2024. In December, more than 500,000 people fled their homes in Jazeera province in Sudan's south following the capture of the state's capital by the RSF fighters. The WHO says that 1 in 7 children under 5 are acutely malnourished. In December, rival commanders El Burhan and Hamdati agreed to one-to-one meeting under the IGAD. However, the meeting was reportedly cancelled when RSF general pulled out. Citing the rotating president of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Nova reported that Uganda will host the summit that should tackle the ongoing crisis between Ethiopia and Somalia and the war in Sudan.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and still with our special reports. Zambia commenced the administration of the oral cholera vaccine in the Shanti compounds of Lusaka, the country's capital, most affected by the current outbreak.
Zambia said it had received a first batch of more than 1 million oral doses of cholera vaccines from the World Health Organization, the WHO, to fight a dangerous outbreak. The Southern African nation has been battling the spread of the deadly disease since October and has already been forced to delay the start of the new school year. More than 374 Zambians have died, 12 of them in the past 24 hours, and 9,580 have fallen sick with cholera, an acute form of diarrhea that can kill within hours. The WHO and the Gavi Global Vaccine Alliance hope to reduce cases worldwide by 90% by 2030 through a campaign of vaccination and improved hygiene. But vaccine doses are in short supply, and outbreaks like that in Zambia threaten that goal. Zambia's health minister warned at the announcement that this outbreak continues to pose a threat to the health security of the nation. The minister said the country has received 1.4 million oral cholera vaccine out of the 1.7 million doses already approved by WHO. WHO, the United Nations Health Agency, confirmed the figure for the shipment in a social media post. Zambia has a population of more than 19 million, and adults need 2 doses for full vaccination, while very young children may need 3. Vaccination will begin in high-risk areas around the capital, the epicenter of the outbreak, with a population of over 3 million.
And dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.